This module is going to be going over system communications. Our objectives are to list the key points at which an EMS call you should communicate and with whom, demonstrate the standard rules of radio communications, be able to deliver a organized radio report, and discuss the advantages and disadvantages of using radio codes. So we know that communication is how we talk, how we communicate with other people, but we also know that it is both verbal and nonverbal. So this is looking more at the verbal side of it. And we're not just talking to patients, we're going to be talking to dispatch, we're going to be talking to medical direction and things like that. So to do this, we use technology. There can be errors that happen, so always make sure that you're going to confirm and repeat any information. Make sure that you're getting the right address, you heard everything correctly when getting a call. So the different times or parts of a call you'll be communicating with somebody are going to be when you are dispatched to the call. So dispatch will call your unit and give you the necessary information to respond to a call. When you get on scene, you will need to call and let dispatch know that you made it. Then when you are departing the scene, you have to let dispatch know. You also have to let them know where you're going. Then you will have to let the receiving facility know that you're on the way. So, and then of course, once you get back in service or you're deconning or whatever, let dispatch know that that's what's going on as well. So several different times that you will have to communicate during your call or your average call. So what we're using for the most part are going to be radios in this communication. So the FCC, or the Federal Communications Commission, are who are responsible for oversight of not only EMS but all radio communications. They approve the standards, they approve or assign the broadcast frequencies, they license your base stations, they give you radio call signs, and they also will deal with any kind of issues and enforce regulations. Like the infamous Justin Timberlake and Janet Jackson Nipplegate thing at Super Bowl. Now that's why live TV has to be delayed by stream. I think it's 30 seconds or so they can edit any of the things like that out. But they are responsible. Now, some of the rules and regulations don't really apply to us, and some do, but for the most part, it's common sense things like you can't say certain words or curse words on the radio and things like that. So with our system communications, it's really important that our agencies have a backup system. And whereas the backup system is usually not quite as good and fully functional as the main system, you have to have a backup in place if the main lines of communication go down. It's essential to have your system maintenance. Usually this is contracted out to some agency that works on it and keeps them up and going. It's also important to make sure that they are fairly standard in how they operate, so that way if a dispatch center needs to relocate to another dispatch center, they can fairly easily figure out how everything works. It's also important that they don't use 10 codes. Now you'll still see some 10 codes, your 10-8, which means back in service, your 10-00, which means help, or 1084 is en route most of the time. So it just, it depends on where you go, but most of the time you're not going to have a lot of 10 codes, very minimal, and they recommend that you don't use any 10 codes, and the main reason for that is if you need to work on an MCI or work with other agencies, they may not have the same 10 codes, so it can make it a little complicated or confusing if you're using the 10 codes when trying to give them information. Our radio systems are going to be working on these assigned radio frequencies or channels, and usually, depending on the size of the agency, they may have a couple of different channels that they can use. I remember we had several channels that we would use, but most of them we did not use often. We had our main channel, but then we had other channel access that we could communicate with, say, volunteer fire departments, or the helicopter if it was coming in, things like that. So just make sure you know whichever frequency you're supposed to be on and that you're on there, and you know how to change them or go to a different frequency if needed. Now, as far as actually using these radios, they usually are a push to talk, which means there's a button on there, you push it, and it takes a moment, and then you talk. Sometimes there's a beep. Make sure you wait, otherwise it cuts off part of your traffic. Speaking of traffic, before you talk, make sure that it's clear and it's open. You want to make sure that you've got the right frequency. You want to listen before you transmit to make sure that you're not interrupting another transmission. You want to push that push to talk button and wait about a second so you don't cut off the first part of your transmission. You want to hold your microphone a couple of inches away from your mouth. Do not try to put it in your mouth and sound like you're eating it. Right? Try to control your voice and aim for a kind of a neutral tone. Some people just naturally have higher pitches or get excited. Try to take a breath before you start speaking. You are supposed to state who you're calling first, followed by your unit identification. For instance, Medic 1, and you're contacting Methodist Hospital. You would say, Methodist Hospital, Medic 1. What usually ends up happening is Medic 1 to Methodist Hospital, but whatever you're supposed to do. Wait for them to respond and let you know. Go ahead means, alright, I'm ready. Stand by means, wait a minute. If they tell you stand by, there's usually a really good reason for it, and they're usually busy. Unless it's an absolute urgent emergency, so if they ask you to stand by, stand by. Then you're going to want to transmit, but keep it short, sweet, and to the point. Picture, if you will, like if you're looking at Netflix and you're reading the little brief blurbs about what's going to be in the movie or the show, that's the kind of radio report you want to give, the Netflix synopsis. We don't want to tell them the whole plot, the ending, every part of it. We just want them to have just enough to know what's going on with the patient. And we want to think about what we say, what we do before we do it, so we can deliver this information in kind of a concise, organized format. As far as the communication equipment itself, you've got your base stations, which you're seeing right there in the top row pictures. It kind of looks like a little keyboard in front of it. This is going to be licensed by the FCC and held somewhere secure, and this is usually going to be like your base station, literally. Your dispatch communication center, something like that. Then you've got your mobile radios there beside it, and that's what you typically will see in your ambulances or in your fire trucks. You'll see them mounted in there, and that's what you talk on. Those are capable of reaching quite a few channels. Your portable radios, the bottom left, this is what you're going to be wearing and taking out into the field so that you can still communicate with dispatch while you're out of your vehicle. Now, these only go so far, so a repeater, kind of like there in that middle picture there, it's an antenna essentially that's going to take a transmission and send it out and be able to go further and communicate with that same base station than you would be without that repeater. It's also beneficial if there are very tall things, mountains, things like that that are in the way. And then of course, cellular phones. Now, cellular phones have come a long way since that one right there, but what we use them for is still essentially the same. We're going to be contacting sometimes dispatch or the hospital or other things like that to let them know and basically give our radio report. We're just using it on the phone. Kind of use the same rules though. Be short, sweet, to the point, the Netflix synopsis of the patient, what's going on, when you're going to be there, that kind of stuff.